What's going on, hustlers? Back at you guys with another video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. The title of the video is going to be explaining first article test and production lot testing. So I'm going to be breaking down the difference between these two, the situations in which they will occur on solicitations, and kind of what the government is looking for as they go through these things. So I'm wearing sunglasses. My pink eye is a lot better, but it's not 100%, still a little bit swollen. So we're gonna keep it rolling with that. I got my PSG jersey on. Kylian Mbappe, he just left. He just played his last match for them. Super sad. Champions League final is coming on in it's coming on in like 35 minutes, which is sweet. Anyway, so two different kinds of testing. You've got first article test, and then you've got production lot testing, right? So a first article, let's start with first article test just because it says it in the name, right? So they really are going to be called an acronym. They're going to show up as FAT on a solicitation. What's a first article test? So first article test, basically in layman's terms, in government contracting for dummies, first article testing is basically a prototype. The government wants you to send them basically a prototype of the material for them to test it, and then determine if the 3 F's are met: the form, fit, and function of the material. If it's all good, then they're going to approve it, and then they can be like, okay, you can go ahead and you can send us the rest of the order. Now, one thing about first article testing is oftentimes, because you're only going to be making 1 or 2 units in a first article test, it's going to be a separate line item on the contract, right? So when you're going to submit your bid, you're going to have like the actual item that you're bidding on, and then you're going to have your first article test, which is going to be a completely separate line item. Like if you look on the solicitation, right, and you look at the CLINs stands for contract line item, it's going to be CLIN 001, which is like the item that you're selling, and then the first article test is typically going to be CLIN 002, because it's going to be 2 separate things. Now, why is that? The government they understand how business works. They're not dumb. They might be lazy, but they're not dumb. So think about this. If you're a manufacturer, right, and then somebody says, a customer comes to you, right, and like, hey, I only need 1 of these specific things, right? And normally, let's just say this pen, right? Let's just say the government's like, hey, I only need 1 specific pen. But realistically, you make these pens in bulk. You make these pens 100 at a time, right? Just for you to make the 1 to the specific specifications that they're going to be asking for, they are going to, or you as a manufacturer are going to invoke an opportunity cost, right? You're going to have your cost of labor, you're going to have your cost of raw material, you're going to have like the cost to use and maintain your machines, you're going to have, your rent and utilities, right? So all that stuff is going to cost, right? And then you're really only going to be making 1. So you then invoke an opportunity cost, because the time that you could be spending to make the 1 pen, or to make 100 pens, you're using only to make 1 pen. So it's actually going to cost you you're going to invoke quite a bit of an opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is basically the money that you would forego that you would be making if you made 100 of these pens, because you're going to be focusing on only 1. So what does all this mean, basically? Because you invoke such a high opportunity cost, the cost of making a first article test is typically going to be significantly higher, right? Like I know in one instance, right, I've really only had 2 experiences with first article tests, just because they take so long to get paid on. But basically, the manufacturer is like, listen, it's an additional $5,500 just for us to make a first article test. 1 unit was already going for $7,000. It was already like a $63,000 contract already. So for me to do a first article test, I think it ended up being like $12,000 just for them to make the material, and then they wanted these test reports. So then I probably ended up, it costed me like $13,500 just for 1 unit, right? And DLA knows this, which is why they make it a separate line item, and then you get to bid your pricing on its own. Now, also consider, if this is the first time that something is being made, then it might have a longer lead time, as opposed to, once you're purchasing that stuff, I don't want to say in bulk, but let's say maybe it's 50 units, right? Once they've already made that 1 unit, they've already got the specifications down, the machine already knows what needs to be done, your employees already know what needs to be done. So you're going to have a different lead time, because it's going to be a lot quicker to make 50 versus that 1 unit. So that's why it's a separate line item, because it's going to have a additional price. It's going to have a very unique price, and then it's going to have possibly a longer lead time. A different lead time, maybe it's longer, right? Now, keep in mind that the goal of a first article test is essentially to determine that you can make the material to the specifications that the government is asking for, right? So boom, that's first article test. Now, I'll be honest with you, I typically like to avoid them because the government has to then test the stuff and then send you approval, and then if they like it, then you can get the green light to go and manufacture the rest of the stuff and ship it to them. Or sometimes, like I've seen an instance, right, where I was a contract manager where I was like super hyped because I bid on something, and then we were like supposed to make like I think $18,000 on it, right? And then the government's like, actually go back and make it again differently this way, and that probably dropped our profit from like $18,000 to $13,000, right? So sometimes you could send it to them, takes them time to approve it, then they don't like it, they send it back to you, then you got to make another first article test, then they send it, then they give you the green light, then you can go and make the amount that they were actually asking for, right? So that's pro and con of first article test. Now, or that's a con, but a pro is a lot of times companies don't like to deal with first article tests. So if you're willing to give the government one, right, and you can actually request to forego them. But if you're willing to give the government one and somebody else bids on a contract and submits a request to forego it, their bid becomes a bid with exception, which drops it down here, and your bid is a bid without exception. So your bid stays in that higher category, right? So that's pro and con of first article test. Boom. Now let's talk about production lot testing. So the acronym could be PLT. Very rarely do I see it in solicitations as PLT, but sometimes it shows up. Typically, though, what you're going to see lot testing. Now, lot testing in a solicitation, right? Basically, the government is going to request lot testing reports. Now, what's a lot testing report? Basically, you're going to make the material. So let's say fast forward 2 years, right? And you've been making these pens. Then you're going to have a lot of 100 pens, right? And then you'll take like a random sample, like a batch out of those 100 pens. So let's just say maybe you take 10 pens, right? And then you conduct testing on those 10 pens out of that batch of 100 or that lot of 100. And then you conduct these tests to determine sorry, long day. I had a 6 a.m. showtime on a flight today, so I was up at like 5 a.m. And then I was also up late last night studying like maneuvers and checklists, so easy day. Anyways, yeah, so they'll conduct these tests to determine if the current pens that you're making a couple years later, or let's just say a couple orders later, are still conforming to the standards that the government initially had set forth. So basically what the purpose is of production lot testing is just to determine that you're continuously meeting those standards. And then first article testing is to determine if you can meet them in the first place, right? So first article test is the first article that you're creating, first time the government's testing the prototype, boom. Production lot testing, you've already been producing it, you have lots of the material, so now you're taking a random lot or a random batch and then subjecting it to testing. So that's the difference between first article testing and production lot testing. Now, another key thing, you can request a waiver on first article testing, but you can't request a waiver on production lot testing. Typically, when you want to get this from a manufacturer, you just say, hey, can I get test reports? And then it'll just be an additional fee. Sometimes they'll already have conducted it, and then you can just pay for the report. Sometimes you got to pay extra for them to conduct it. ADO meaning at date of order, right? So just a little caveat between the two. If a solicitation says first article test, you can bypass it. You can bypass it by selling surplus, which we teach you how to do. But production lot testing, you can't bypass it. If the solicitation is asking for it, you can do it. You can bid on the solicitation, attempt to fulfill it, and then if you don't have your production lot testing, you'll get dinged for it. So you could bypass it, but just know that it will affect your spur score. So that's the difference between first article testing and production lot testing. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, hustlers. Not only am I looking forward to your success, I'm sure of it. Let's go print those dollars.